If you're going to like or dislike a public figure, it should be based on something more than just your reaction to that particular individual. And that, unfortunately, is what we see a lot with Donald Trump, where people are making up metrics by which to judge this man that have nothing to do with any real moral standard. So I wanted to comment on this video that came out a little while ago with Cenk Uygur, the founder and host of the Young Turks, on the Patrick Bet-David podcast. And they get to talking about Donald Trump. These two guys have very different opinions and they debate a bit. They talk about Trump's merits or lack of merits and what motivates him. It's very interesting. I thought I'd play some clips from this and make some remarks.
And this is what establishment media does not understand about Donald Trump. Yes, I think Hillary Clinton said two correct things in her life. One of them was the deplorable line that everybody hates. No, that's totally true. In my opinion, half the Republican base is deplorable. And I think they are racist, bigots, sexist, etc. We could talk
half,
easily half, okay? But the other half,
that's 40 million people in America.
Absolutely. Not even close.
You believe that?
100%. We could debate it.
Yeah, he's not entirely wrong here. I mean, there are certainly some deplorable ideas among Donald Trump supporters. I have been shocked sometimes at the things I've heard in person. Just, me and my own personal experience have encountered a number of what I would call deplorable ideas coming from people who are Donald Trump supporters. And of course, this shouldn't surprise people. The American far right has a long history of being guilty of many terrible things that have happened in the country and around the world. So, yeah, they've got some bad ideas. Of course, someone like Hillary Clinton being the one to call that out, that's a little rich, a little hypocritical maybe. Maybe a reminder to all of us, myself included, when we go pointing the finger at others, there could also be some fingers pointing back at us. We always have our blind spots. We might hear something, see something, and call it out, say, oh, that's terrible, that's deplorable. But that should make us wonder, hey, I wonder about the things that I believe. Remember, all the law is fulfilled in this one thing. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. If you want to be on the right side of things, make sure that you are living up to that standard, thinking of others and their well-being as much as you would think of yourself and your own well-being. That's a tall order, but that's what the standard is.
Okay, but hold on. Let me get to the other 40 million, okay? The other 36 million or so that voted for Trump, no, they're just angry that the establishment is screwing them. And they don't know how they're getting screwed.
That's exactly what Charlie Kirk said.
Right, and that's
they're scorned.
And they hate mainstream media, and they're right, because mainstream media is a factory of lies.
I think Cenk's a little bit jealous, He had a go at mainstream media. His own YouTube project, The Young Turks, was for a time considered to be quite mainstream, quite avant-garde in so-called new media. He had a lot of funding, and he's lost a lot of the prestige, a lot of the big donors, and maybe he's become a little bit more of a fire breather against the so-called mainstream media himself, as he's seen his fortunes decline a bit, because his channel, his show has carried a lot of the same water that the so-called mainstream media has carried in regards to, for example, American foreign policy. Cenk Uygur and the Young Turks hasn't always been exactly a bunch of crusaders for the truth and for standing up for the third world. But it's nice to see him, come around and make some criticisms, some valid criticisms of the media. He himself has certainly had a lot of experience. He would know a lot of what goes on behind the scenes, and so his criticisms certainly carry some weight.
So they'll say, oh, the status quo is great. For who? Yeah, the billionaires who run those companies and the millionaires who are on air. Yes, for you guys, everything's hunky-dory. But it's not great for when wages didn't go up for 45 straight years. Now, because of inflation, they ironically went up a little bit. But for 45 years straight, wages did not go up. Okay, we have no universal health care in this country when every other developed country in the world has it. We have no paid family leave.
That's just a great point. We are having our points of view developed and influenced by very rich people who have completely different concerns from the average person that they are talking to on TV and who they are influencing. There is such a big gulf economically and in lifestyle between the media consumer and the media producers and the stars and the people who are shaping the opinions of the general public. It is not working class people who are on TV telling people how things are in the country and giving their opinions on the news. No, it is the class of the ultra wealthy who is shaping a narrative for the average person to consume. And that's how you end up with this phenomenon of low-income people who are very upset about high taxes, or people just generally being upset and opinionated on things that have no influence on them, that they could never really fully understand, yet they feel very concerned and opinionated about. That's the power of the media, shaping the mindsets and thereby shaping economic policy, shaping foreign policy in ways that wouldn't naturally come about through regular human interactions, but are shaped by very wealthy and skilled people.
They're getting checks and then doing exactly as they are told. And that's true of 99% of the Republican Party. And yes, 80% of the Democratic Party at least.
Stop. The way you just said it was so funny. So 99% Republican Party, 80% the Democratic Party. Okay. Can you pull up the chart that just came up? This one right here. Total spending of presidential campaign financing in the United States. They changed a law, I think, in 2019, 2020 that allowed corporations to just open up their checkbooks. I'm sure you're familiar with this. Look at the kind of money we raised for presidential campaigns. From Carter, 197 million, to Reagan, 228 million, to Reagan again, 380, to Bush Sr., 346, to Clinton, 478, to Clinton again, 612, then it's Bush, 891, then it's Obama, I think it's, what's that, 1.769 billion, 1.4 billion again Obama, 1.529 million Hillary Trump. Boom! $4 billion. Whatever they could to get rid of Trump. They spend all the money in the world to get rid of this guy. They figured out ways to say, dude, if we can outspend that guy.
So here's where the debate starts between the two. You know, on the one hand, we have, Cenk Uygur, who leans left, and he feels a little bit more of an affinity with the left-wing politicians. He's not maybe a big fan of most Democrats, but he certainly considers that side to be the better side of things. And then there's the other guy, Patrick Bet-David, who is more of a Republican. And they both want to see their camp as being the side that's a little bit more pure, a little less corrupt. And so here you got some statistics now, how statistics are, and you can do whatever you want with them. And you can have two kinds of people looking at the same statistics and coming up with different conclusions, making different stories about those statistics. So here we go with the debate on corruption in politics, money, control, being an outsider, pro or anti-establishment, etc. Here we get into it.
This is the part where, for me, where we agree and where we disagree. This is the part. Like, I had Ari Fleischer here. You know who Ari Fleischer is? And I'm like, a couple of the decisions you guys made when you listen to the CI and these, I'm like, why wouldn't you double verify this? This is a big decision you're making to do this, to do that. Well, I don't know, but we could have done this and we could have done that. And we had Paul Manafort here. I'm like, dude, lobbying. Why? It's the dirtiest thing out there. And he's like, well, I totally get it. But, him and Roger Stone started the lobbying firm. I don't know one of the most powerful lobby firms that they had together 30 years ago, 40 years ago. He said, well, the other guy's going to do it. What are you going to do? Sit on the sidelines? Okay, valid point. But I like both sides not to do it, right? However, when you look at it now, and you see the kind of money that's being spent on the left for them to push their agendas over. You set aside this lobby stuff out. You set aside corporations putting money in to who they buy. Like, the joke about Koch brothers. Well, he wakes up and says, what do I get for my birthday? Which president, right? Now it's more the left that's doing that. You got the Soroses. You got the Larry Fink and BlackRock with how their ESG score and, State Street and Vanguard. And that thing's becoming a reality where it's no longer about Democrat and Republican. It's truly becoming more about the establishment folks and the anti-establishment folks.
100%.
And if we're talking anti-establishment, Cenk, you have to agree on this, bro. You have to agree on this. I know it's going to be tough for you to agree on this, but if you don't, give me everything you got, what I say right now. You can't say Trump is an establishment candidate.
No, but I can't say he's corrupt. So there's a huge difference, and I'll explain.
Okay, fair. Go for it.
Okay, so Trump is not establishment. The establishment hates him. You're totally right about that, okay? And so...
Which for guys like us, we like that, don't we?
Yeah, but then you have to see, okay, why do they hate him, right?
All right, so is Donald Trump establishment, anti-establishment, and does that make him right or wrong? You know, this whole thing can get a little confusing, a little bit circular, contradictory, because you have this idea, this made-up idea that there's this establishment, and then, well, I'm not saying that there's no such thing as an establishment, but people use that term in very different ways, and they apply different things, different attributes to it, and then they want to make this or that person or idea pro-establishment or anti-establishment, and determine right or wrong according to the standard of establishment and anti-establishment. So it's a little nebulous. It's kind of a hard way to judge things. So we're going to see Patrick Bet-David and Cenk Uygur now get into a discussion on this. And Cenk Uygur wants to be anti-establishment, but he also wants to be critical of Donald Trump. So let's see how this plays out.
Number one, he's unstable, so business
Can't
interests
be controlled.
And that's also true, though. That's also true.
Okay.
Well, no, he can't be controlled because he's so unstable and unhinged.
Which is
right?
a strength, though. In a way, it is an edge you have against your enemy, because if the enemy feels they can't control you, dude, we have to eliminate you if we can't control you.
There's some pretty funny ideas about what makes Trump good, you know, in the minds of Donald Trump supporters, and one of them, like, for example, they'll say, well, at least he's honest, at least he's genuine, or here it's like, well, at least he can't be controlled. Like, these things aren't good in and of themselves. Being genuine isn't a good thing if you're genuinely bad. Being uncontrollable isn't a good thing if that person's own will and desires aren't directed towards good. Maybe one set of bad ideas can't control Donald Trump because he's got his own set of bad ideas. So some of these so-called attributes just on their own don't really mean a whole lot. I'd much rather hear about how would this person treat someone else in this or that situation. How would this person treat someone in need, and make that the standard, you know, judging people according to this higher standard that we all know and love, whether it's from the New Testament or some other source of influence. These are fairly universally acknowledged truths about right or wrong, and yet sadly we put them aside when we get into politics, for example. We start coming up with other metrics and leaving aside the things that we all know are right.
Okay, now let's talk about that, though.
Okay.
So now, why do I still say he's super corrupt? Now, Trump had trouble getting money from normal corporate interests. And I agree, that's normally a good thing, right? So what did he do? He had to go make up the money. So he went and talked to Sheldon Adelson. So Sheldon Adelson is actually, before he passed away in 2021, largest political donor in history. He gave $100 million to Trump twice, to him and his PACs in 2016 and 2020. What did he get in return? He got corruption charges in China dismissed against him.
To be fair, he's like the Soros of the right. He was like the Soros of the right.
That's right.
Vegas,
fair.
casino
Yeah.
tycoon,
Sure.
pro-Israel.
He got everything. He's the guy who got the embassy moved. He's the guy who repatriating taxes from abroad, because most of his money is in Macau, China, because that's where most of his casinos are.
Casino business,
And
yeah.
he got that tax that knocked down to 8%. So from 35% to 8%, he made billions off of Trump. And on top of getting rid of the corruption charges and the tax cuts and everything, just as a little tchotchke, Trump threw in Miriam Adelson getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
His wife.
His wife. Yeah. Are you kidding me? So Trump could easily be bought.
This guy, Adelson, such a fascinating character, such a big player in politics for years, you know. He was like a kingmaker. All the Republican candidates would come to him, like trying to have an audience with him, trying to get his support. He was a guy backing one presidential candidate after another: George W. Bush, Mitt Romney, John McCain, Donald Trump. This guy had so much influence over American politics, And of course he's a big backer of Donald Trump being the Republican candidate and then Republican president of the United States. It's, again, this idea that Donald Trump is not establishment. What does establishment mean or not mean then if we're going to say that Donald Trump isn't establishment, taking money from the biggest donors in the United States and then doing the things that he is asked to do? If that's not establishment, I don't know what establishment is.
Dude, Obama got a Nobel Prize a month after being a president just for what he was.
I know, but that isn't about corruption. That was just them being silly, right? Okay. So my point is
for a
that
DEI score.
Trump is perfectly corrupt and can be bought. It's just that who's buying him is the question.
I don't know.
So you read the portion about Adelson in my book.
Sure.
There's no question he did everything that Adelson asked him. And by the way, I say to the readers, are you sure you wouldn't if somebody funneled $100 million to you and then $200 million to you?
I would. No,
yeah, right?
Yeah, money corrupts. That's a scary little thought exercise Trent brings up here. What would you do or not do were you offered that kind of opportunity? Maybe that's why, there's certain occupations that I think someone with morals, someone with value, somebody who holds strong Christian beliefs or has some kind of strong moral foundation, there's things that they just shouldn't get into. And perhaps politics is one of those things. We're always excited to see someone come along onto the political scene who we think is going to be doing a good job and going to be in favor of the things that we think are important. But it's such a dirty world, this world of politics. There's so much corruption, so much being offered to the people who get into it. I don't know, man. I think it might just be one of those things like in the Gospels when the tax collectors come to John the Baptist and say, hey, what do we need to do to repent? And he tells them, well, don't charge people more than what you're supposed to. And, well, to them, if they stopped doing that, they wouldn't have a job anymore. They wouldn't have a source of income. And, then soldiers come to John and John tells them, be content with your wages and do violence to no man. Again, if they're going to do that, what kind of job do you have if you're a soldier and you're not going to do violence to anybody? And what would be the appeal in that occupation at that time if they couldn't take advantage of their position for some kind of gain? So, I think there's some kinds of jobs and occupations that just are bad pretty much in and of themselves and should be avoided by people who are seeking to do the right thing and seeking to live the right way.
He's had all the money. He's been to all the parties. He's got all the letters from all the most powerful people in the world telling them how much they love him. Alec Baldwin, no one ever treated me like this. Oprah Winfrey, that book he wrote about all the letters that others wrote for him that now they hate him. Chuck Schumer used to love me. He used to love me when this, that, that whole talk that he gave.
And he's right about that part.
Yeah, so.
Such a crazy world, the world of big money and politics. Donald Trump used to be just kind of the funny kind of guy, the funny billionaire. He was likable. He had this big brand. The Trump name used to be worth so much, and so many people courted him for his money and what he could do for them. Kind of like the way we were just talking about Sheldon Adelson. Donald Trump used to be kind of in that position himself, sort of a big money guy, a big donor guy who worked with Democrats and Republicans. And the politicians and the establishment and the big media loved him. But then they had their falling outs over this and that, and now they all hate each other. Okay, well, what did they ever love each other or hate each other for? What was there any kind of underlying values or lack of values? Who changed and what? It's kind of a crazy game that these guys play, and I think, at the heart of it, there's just a lot of immorality. There's a lot of people being influenced and swayed by money and by fame, and they can be on one side one day and on the other side another day, and that applies to Donald Trump and so many of his detractors and critics.
But the point is, he's had the girls, he's had the fame, he's had the properties, he's been to the parties, he's had the money. How the hell are you going to, does he want to be, if he's worth $2.5 billion right now?
He's not.
Let's just say he's worth,
he's not. He's a total loser. He's almost bankrupt.
Well, okay. So you can say that, and that's fine. But
Can't say he's a loser. though.
but
Total
I mean,
loser.
But if you say he's bankrupt, you can say that can be your opinion. But the last 60 years, or the last 50 years, proves you wrong.
This is going to get kind of funny here because, as we can see, Cenk Uygur can't stand the thought that Donald Trump might be successful. Now, Patrick Bet-David is trying to make a point here, showing that because Donald Trump is successful, therefore he can't be bought. It's an odd point to try to make. I don't know why that would be a conclusion to draw from Donald Trump's past success. But anyway, he's going to try to make that case. And Cenk Uygur, because he doesn't like Donald Trump, doesn't want to admit that Donald Trump is successful. And it's going to be a little bit of a curious argument going on here.
Okay.
It doesn't. It proves me right.
15 years Apprentice was number one. How the hell are you that entertaining to be number one for 15 years, right? You know, financially, real estate properties, when you think about a real estate name brand, you think about one name. You don't think about 50 different names. You think about a guy that's been able to brand himself, you think about Trump. Now, are you going to buy Trump's steak? Probably not. But you're going to buy...
Neither did anyone else.
Neither did... But the point is, he's had great victories. He's got kids that are doing well for themselves. He's got a daughter that, you know, has
So does
done...
Biden.
Yeah. That was a different angle you took. But where I'm going with this is, that's the part where I feel they can't stand the guy because they cannot control him.
There's two problems with the argument that Patrick Bet-David is trying to make there. You know, for one, people who have success don't become unambitious. They when someone has a lot by worldly standards, and when that's their goal and desire, what do they want next? They want more. They're a senator, they want to be a governor. They're a governor, they want to be the president. You have $10 million, you want your next 10 million, you want your 100 million, then you want to be a billionaire, then you want to be a multi-billionaire, then you want to get to the top 10 billionaires. There's no cutoff point for a lot of these successful, ambitious people. They are successful by the world standards because they don't stop. So to say, well, Donald Trump made his billions, therefore he has enough, well, who's to say that? You know, that is not the way that billionaires behave. That's not the way that powerful people behave. Case in point, look at Donald Trump right now. He got to the top of everything. You know, he was the president of the United States, held life and death in his hands, and he used it and he abused it. And now, what does he want? He wants to be president again. You know, these guys don't stop. There is never enough for some of these kinds of people. And then again, the idea that because he can't be controlled, as if that's some kind of a virtue. It's not. Virtue, being good, being on the right side of things, comes from a moral foundation. I would remind Patrick Bet-David to read his New Testament, read the Gospels. If you want to see an example of someone doing good, someone who has virtue, someone who we can look up to, point to, and say, hey, there's a good example, there's something that we should like and admire and want more of, well, there's better people, better examples to look at than Donald Trump. Again, I would recommend looking to the New Testament, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Read the epistles. That's where you're going to find something to really look up to. In fact, let me read a little bit here from the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew chapter 9. And Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Then saith he unto his disciples, The harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. I'm going to put a link here to a commentary I did a couple years ago with a friend of mine, where we read through and discussed Matthew chapters 9 and 10, where Jesus commissions his disciples and tells them the kind of things that he wants them to do. I'm going to move on here now to famous 1 Corinthians chapter 13 by the Apostle Paul, one of Jesus' disciples. Love suffereth long and is kind. Love envies not. Love vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, does not behave itself unseemly, seeks not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Yeah, so that's what we're supposed to be looking at. Maybe we shouldn't be looking at these politicians, these immoral people who have the wrong standards, have the wrong goals, and then making up new standards to apply to try to determine right from wrong. Things like anti-establishment, things like being a rogue, being against the grain, being non-controlled. Like, these things, these are just adjectives. Like, what do they mean? Well, we have actual standards to look at and determine things by.
So first of all, with Trump, look, the guy's got insatiable greed. So I don't buy that, he's had enough. He's never had enough, okay? Number two, he's a natural born loser. He's lost at everything except two things. Obviously, he won the presidency in 2016. Yeah, he lost the popular vote, and Democrats cry about that. And they should. The Electoral College is terrible. It's a disaster. But he won the Electoral College. He won it, right? So you give him that for sure. And he's great at marketing. Just blah, 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 Trump, 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 Trump. And Democrats don't get it. They're such knuckleheads. They're like, if we have an accomplishment, we should whisper about it on NPR. No, you should scream at the top of your lungs like Trump does. But having said that, bankrupt 6 times, got clowned in 2020, and has been crying about it ever since like a little spoiled brat. Had to have his dad get him into the schools that he got into. He hides his grades from high school and college because he's a loser. He's a spoiled little baby. He blew $413 million from his dad, blew it all. Then he got $400 million from Apprentice. Why was that successful? Because of the producers. I know the producers on that show. They had to treat him like a baby. Hey, baby, come here. Baby, say this.
There's the same producers have done shows that flopped.
Yeah,
you know how hard
but
it
they've
is to
also
keep-
the same producers who did other number one hits.
so hard to keep a number one hit show for 15.
So while Cenk is making some good points there, he's kind of missing the point, I think. It's hard to look at somebody like Donald Trump and say he's a loser when he's won by so many of the metrics of how society determines whether someone is a success or not. He has money, power, fame. His children and grandchildren have generational wealth. It's hard to say he's a loser and he can't make money and these kind of things. And sad to say, I think it's because someone like Cenk Uygur doesn't really have a very sound moral foundation by which to judge things. So he's very much into politics. He's into the world of American politics, the parties and their issues and their platforms and their history. And he may be on the right side of some things, but you've got to have a standard. You've got to have a moral foundation to work with. Like in Matthew chapter 7 and Luke chapter 6, where Jesus tells the story of the man who builds a house on a foundation of stone versus the man who builds a house on top of the ground on the sand without there being a foundation going down to the rock. And what happens when the storm comes, when things get troublesome, adverse? Well, the one is built on things that last. The one set of works, one set of someone's life is built on things that matter, that go on regardless of the disasters that may strike. The other just doesn't matter. The world of American politics, how long is it going to last for? How long are these things going to be remembered and be important? They're going to be old history a few decades or centuries from now, maybe even forgotten history. It's the things that are done by the standard of love, by the standard of altruism. Those are building something. Those are contributing towards a better world for everybody. And so it's important to have a method for determining actions and right from wrong that is built on something that will last.
But if you want to say Trump is entertaining, I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. He's pretty good at marketing, right? And he says these terrible things, but people laugh, right? And I get it. And his giant strength that people don't talk about, and no one in mainstream media acknowledges this, he doesn't look fake. I think he's a con man, and he's been a con man his whole life, but he looks authentic because he doesn't go off a prompter. And you think, well, that's a real guy who's saying crazy crap that nobody else would say.
All right, well, very entertaining. These guys are super skilled. Some of the biggest shows on YouTube, biggest political shows on YouTube. They're going at it. They're having a discussion. I'll put the link below. I didn't actually watch the full interview, but I saw this little bit here, and I thought this would be something interesting to comment on, try to bring out some Christian perspective into it, and let me know what you think. How did I do? What do you agree with, disagree with? Leave a comment below, and I'll talk to you later. Bye for now.